What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the long overdue second edition of Alive Answers. So we've taken all the questions that you've asked under Ask Alive over our social media platform, compiled them up, and now we've done the research. We're going to come back to you with answers now. So today we've actually got loads of questions to get through, so I'm going to break this video into three parts. Number one, we're going to cover different frameworks for managing change and dealing with transition in life. Number two, we're going to cover sort of the neuroscience of mindfulness and what mindfulness actually does to our brain. And number three, we're going to get into some of the benefits of mindfulness and cover off on a question that we got about how we can encourage others in our lives or the children around us as well to start using mindfulness if they're not already. So let's get into it. So the first question we got was about dealing with change and sort of the loss of your identity. So this has been a pretty hectic year for everyone. Everyone's sort of undergoing these massive changes in life and these big transitional moments. So this first question and our answer is all about how we manage these personal changes and adjust to the new circumstances that we find ourselves in, whether that's a new job situation, a new living situation, whatever. There's some pretty consistent themes that come about when we talk about dealing with change. And the framework that we're going to use to sort of draw out some of these consistent themes and how to manage each stage is the Kubler-Ross change curve. So this change curve essentially defines the consistent stages that we go through when we're trying to adapt to something new or move through a transition, and it's really focused on sort of the emotional side of what we're going through and how we can accelerate change by embracing each phase and fully experiencing the emotions within each stage. So the first stage is all about the impact. Something happens in your life, there's a big shift, and the first thing that we're going to experience is a sense of denial. We're going to avoid the issue. It's going to be shocking. We're not really creatures of change, we're creatures of habit, and this is going to be a massive shock to our system. And then once we do move close towards acceptance, we actually start feeling the frustration and all the negative emotions associated with the sense of loss that we're experiencing from our original state. So this stage is mainly about moving from resistance, where we're in that denial, to sort of acceptance. And even though it's hard and it doesn't feel good, we're gonna do the best we can to move to acceptance and sort of speed up the process of helping ourselves along there. So what can we do to fully embrace this stage and I guess support our wellness and psychological health throughout? So number one is communication. Communication is actually going to be essential throughout all these stages, but specifically in the denial and anger stage, we want to focus on communicating to gain a sense of clarity and understanding about what's actually happening. So this is going to be a lot about communicating with others to gain a different and wider perspective over the issue that we're dealing with, and really trying to confront reality head on. So we don't want to hide from anything. We want really open, honest communication from those around us to gain that sense of self-awareness about what's happening in our own lives. The second thing that we can do personally, along similar lines to enhance our perspective, is use things like journaling or meditation to gain a more third-person perspective of what's actually happening to us and start looking at our situation more objectively so we can analyze the issue in, sort of more of a real form without us putting a subjective spin on it, because the closer we are to reality in the situation, the better we can actually deal with it. Number three is to use cognitive reframing. So we're going to use techniques from CBT or Stoic principles to actually sort of look at how we can look at embracing these challenges rather than framing them as something negative. You can start to slowly look at it as an opportunity for growth and renewal and a bit of a reset in your life. So the Stoic principle that I like to use is amor fati, which is about embracing your fate, embracing everything that comes your way and accepting it and taking it head on. It's a difficult change, but it will certainly help you if you can cultivate that sort of mindset through this time. And our last tip is to just breathe. So through these times, our sense of stress and anxiety is going to be a lot more heightened compared to where we were. So we really want to make use of things like relaxation techniques such as diaphragmatic breathing. So if we can master diaphragmatic breathing and make sure that we're not breathing sort of from up here in the shoulders in a really short, tight breaths, which is what activates our stress system. We want to be taking really deep breaths through the belly. and we want to be breathing out for longer than we're breathing in. So something like breathing in nice and slow for 5 seconds, and then breathing out for longer, maybe 5 to 10 seconds, and that'll start calming us down and give us a better sort of lower baseline of anxiety, and it'll be a lot easier to deal with other negative emotions. So moving on now to stage 2. So once we've accepted what's happening to us, we do end up often in a bit of a hole, and this is the depression phase. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, helpless, and feel like you just want to run away from the situation at this stage. And what we want to focus on here in the dip is moving from focusing on the problem to starting to focus on the solution. And the faster that we can do that, without skipping any steps, we want to fully embrace the sort of emotions that we're feeling. We don't want to deny them and repress them, but the more we can start shifting towards that future orientation and a focus on the solution, the better. So we want to start moving towards the bargaining phase, which is where we're actually reaching out, we're explaining to others how we're feeling, and we're starting to have that sense of future optimism. So what can we actually do to accelerate reaching this bargaining phase? We want to communicate. Again, communication is essential all the way through, but now we really want the communication to focus on empathy and support. Last time we sought that sort of understanding from people, and we really wanted the facts from them in a way, but this time all we really want is to lean on our support network and just tell people that you just want an ear to acknowledge how you're feeling. You're not looking for advice, you're not looking for, any harsh analysis, you just want empathy and support. Also, at this phase, number 2 is about maximizing your good habits and minimizing the bad. So this is going to be really important, especially towards the bottom of the dip, because anything that you can do that's positive for you is going to sort of provide a bottoming out that's a little bit higher than if you were sort of maintaining bad habits, and you'd end up bottoming out a lot lower in terms of your mood and that sort of thing. So we want to maximize the basic good habits. This is the time when it's most important to do so. When you're feeling your worst, it's also the hardest, but again, most important. So we want to be sleeping really well, we want to be focusing on our nutrition, we want to focus on exercise, and any other good habits that you may have. Really think about here what's helped you in the past, and look to bring some of that back in and build on what you've done in the past as well. And really, really important to stay away from your bad habits. It's going to be super tempting, your resilience is going to be low, your discipline, your sense of self-control is going to be all but going out the window. But we really want to avoid bad habits such as drinking alcohol to cope with the issue, or turning to drugs or something like that at the extreme. And then less extreme but bad habits that will definitely further that dip and deepen the dip. Things like consuming media that doesn't really help us, engaging in gossip and that sort of thing, being around negative people, all those bad habits that make us feel worse. Just make sure that you're keeping tabs on what you're doing and what's actually giving you energy versus draining your energy. The last thing that we want to do in this phase is to lay the foundations for our future state and start setting some big goals. The thing that we're focusing on here is not achieving any goals. We just want to sort of develop them and start cultivating that future mindset. So creating that gap in our heads from where we are and where we want to be. And we don't want the gap to be so wide that it feels crushing and feels like we'll never get there. But we want to set small, incremental, realistic goals for ourselves so we can start seeing that, hey, it won't always be like this. We want to start thinking about future state and being open to things changing. So once we've done that, we actually move on to the next phase. So phase 3 is all about a reset. It's a final acceptance of what's happened to you. You've moved through that depression phase and the bargaining phase. You completely understand what's happened, and now you're looking to explore new options and thinking about what new things you can implement and integrate into your life. So now we're really in the problem-solving phase. We're sort of reaching a state of emotional equanimity. We're coming out of that dip, and we want to start looking at really tackling problems head-on because we have that resilience now, and starting to implement solutions. So what do we do to help ourselves in this phase? Number 1, again, communication, essential throughout. We can't get through anything in our own heads, and we always need to be communicating, so it's always there. But in this phase specifically, we want to focus on advice and planning with other people. So recruiting the perspective of others and sort of relaying to them what our plans are, what our new options actually are, and starting to get advice from them in a second perspective on how we can actually achieve those things or move towards them more quickly. Number 2 is building momentum. So when we spoke about setting those goals before, now we really want to start putting action in place and taking action to reach those initial goals and set new ones. So here it's not just about creating the gap between now and the future, we actually want to start moving towards it, and it's that progress towards our goals that'll start feeding that positive emotion, build up our serotonin, and start giving us positive momentum. Lastly, what we want to do is cultivate curiosity. This is so important for moving into a new phase of your life. You want to be really, really open to change and sort of seek out new experiences. It can be really easy for us to stay stagnant and get stuck in the sort of mundane routine of our lives. The more we cultivate curiosity and seek out new things that are as simple as going to new places, meeting new people, and trying new hobbies, the more our mindset kind of expands and we understand that our experience is actually fluid. The more we change our environment, the people that we're around, the things that we're doing, the more we actually change as well, and we grow and evolve. So that'll give us, again, more positive momentum and more positive emotion coming out of the final stage. And probably lastly worth mentioning is we want to really focus on celebrating our successes here. So it's going to be a lot about self-positive reinforcement. So those small incremental goals that you get, you really want to stop and reflect and think about how you're doing and how far you've actually come in this time. Awesome. So that's it. That's moving through the different phases of change, and hopefully you found some of those tips really useful for both accelerating the pace of transition and also making the transition phases themselves a little bit easier and a little bit more bearable in a sense. I just wanted to put this last slide here together just to emphasize that no matter what's happening in our lives, whether we're facing change or not, there's 100,000 things that we can do every day to bolster our resilience and give us that higher sort of baseline level of mood and experience, really. So no matter what's happening, whether we're in a change phase or not, I just wanted to call out that there are things that we can do to lift our mood, such as meditation, journaling, goal setting again, daily gratitude, connecting with others is such a big one. Having strong relationships and engaging with other people and feeling a sense of community will always bring us up. So these sort of things, no matter what's happening with the ups and downs in our lives, these kind of bolster us and keep us at like a higher sort of operating level. So that's it, guys, for question number 1 on managing change. If you have any other tips for managing transitions and all that sort of thing in life, please leave them as a comment to this video. I'm sure everyone would be really keen to hear your thoughts as well. We might just move on to question number 2, which is all about meditation. So I got a really broad question, which was just, why should I actually meditate? This is something that's thrown around a lot of the time, and I'm a big believer in, so I'm happy to cover off on this one. Why should I meditate? I think the main reason is because the mind is just all we have. So meditation works directly on improving the function and the health of your mind, not so much from the physical standpoint in terms of your biology and the physical structures in the brain, but more so from that subjective sort of perspective of your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, and all that sort of thing. It works directly on that organ. And the reason it's so important is that the mind is involved in literally every single thing we do. Every action, every thought, every moment of perception, your mind is pretty much creating your reality. So it's so important that we put something like meditation at the front of our mind, and we're looking after that all-important organ that is the brain and the mind. So the benefits of meditation, I've put my top 5 there. Number 1 is just about calm and clarity. So meditation in as little as 10 to 12 weeks can lower your baseline level of anxiety by a significant amount, which helps you get into sort of more relaxed, focused states a lot easier. I put clarity there as well because those who meditate are way more likely to get into flow states where they sort of have that real focus and you're able to get into deep work and that sort of thing. The second benefit that I put there is about presence and relationships. So meditation is really good for training soft skills like active listening and empathy, and really deepens the connection that you can have with others. So for example, if you're in a conversation with someone else, you've pretty much got you, the other person, and then your thoughts. And the main thing that you want to do is remove your thoughts from the equation so you can actually have a conversation with another person without also having a conversation with your own mental chatter and the self-referential conversation that you're having in your own head, because that really gets in the way of you and the other person and essentially puts up like a block between the connection that you could have with someone else and the potential for that conversation. Number 3 is all about positive emotion. So those who meditate actually have a brain that's far more biased towards positive emotion. And this is kind of created through a variety of mechanisms, but 2 notable ones is the fact that meditation breaks through your brain's default mode network. So your default mode network is essentially the patterns that your brain is stuck in, and it is really, really repetitive if you stop to notice it. Usually we only throw up about 10 different concepts that are kind of on a loop, and most of the time this has an extremely negative bias, just given the way that we are as humans. We're always on the lookout for danger, we're always thinking about the worst case scenario. Planning and worrying are a huge part of this default mode network, so meditation can cut right through that and ensure that we're stepping back and creating a bit of space for ourselves between where we feel we are and those worried and repetitive thoughts. And the other reason it creates more positive emotion is that it keeps us present. So if we think excessively about the future, that does tend to invoke a state of uncertainty and anxiety just naturally. And if we tend to dwell too much in the past, a lot of that can turn into a sense of regret, loss, and depression. Staying in the present, keeps us grounded, and it's where we can really flourish, and a lot of positive emotions happen with that real-time perception. The 4th thing that I put in there is about problem solving and attention. So meditation is actually really effective at training our ability to handle big cognitive loads and solve complex problems. One side of this is kind of the fact that it does improve our focus. It takes a lot of top-down control and a lot of mental energy to stay focused and on track while you're trying to solve difficult problems. Meditation really helps us eliminate all those distractions and do that. And the other reason it helps us with problem solving is because it actually improves our creativity. Again, breaking down that default mode network can open up our brain to see new patterns and new frameworks and come up with new ideas and solutions. And the last one is that it increases our sovereignty. It stops us from acting on this unconscious loop where we're just affected by external stimuli, we process things unconsciously, and then we react to events. It helps us to respond rather than react and consciously process. And when we consciously process more things rather than being ruled by our unconscious, we're actually a lot freer to make decisions based on our deepest values rather than just the things that are pre-programmed into our unconscious mind. So we're not just running on a program like we're in the Matrix, breaking out of the Matrix, we're in control, it's top down, it's coming from the frontal cortex of our brain rather than those limbic systems that can just pull us around and control us at will. It again puts us in the driver's seat of all that. So that's why you should meditate. If anyone else has any reasons that come to mind when they think about meditation, I'd love to hear them. So again, just throw them in the comments to this video. So moving on to question 3 now. Someone was asking about how does meditation actually change our mind? So what's happening in our brain that causes these changes in our subjective experience? It pretty much works on 2 main mechanisms. There's a whole lot else going on, but the main effects can be summarized by talking about these 2. So I like to think of it as it changes the relationship between our prefrontal cortex, the conscious, rational side of our brain, and areas of the limbic system such as the amygdala, which are more sort of primitive parts of the brain and more associated with emotions and impulsivity and a lot of those type of things. So 2 main things happen when we meditate. Number 1 is that the communication between your medial cortex in your prefrontal cortex and the amygdala actually decreases. So the medial cortex is an area of your brain that's responsible for a lot of your self-referential thought. This is an area of the brain that a lot of people identify as being themselves. Like, this is where you get that internal mental chatter, that kind of I am a me talk, essentially. So the communication between that and the amygdala turned down. So essentially that means we're a lot less bound in our sense of identity to impulsivity, strong emotions that can be rather overpowering and that sort of thing. We get like this distance there, a little bit of a gap, and then a sense of freedom that comes from that. So that's one part, and then the other part is the fact that the more rational part of our prefrontal cortex, the lateral cortex, and the communication between that part and the amygdala actually increases. So we're better able to rationalize some of the signals that come from the emotional parts of our brain through this lateral cortex. So we're better able to work through and respond in a productive way when negative emotions do arise in our minds. So what this does overall is kind of tips the balance in our favor to a more rational and productive approach to life in general. We're no longer overwhelmed by the more emotional side of our brain. It's again encouraging that top-down control, that sense of sovereignty, and a real sense of freedom and ownership over who we are, how we're feeling, and some of the thoughts that we're having. So this last question is all about encouraging mindfulness in others, and the question, when it was asked, specifically focused on how we can encourage mindfulness in the younger people around us. I think that's an awesome question. I love the fact it's focused on younger people, because I think this is something that's becoming increasingly important. Young people are growing up, including myself, in a completely digital age, and I think there's a whole host of benefits that come from that when we use and leverage technology appropriately. But a lot of the time, tech's really, really powerful, and if we don't have the tools to manage its impact on our minds and who we are, it can be quite destructive. So for young children, having their attention pulled in so many different directions and having their sense of focus and awareness so fragmented when they're in digital environments by high stimulus social media, advertisement, and all those things that demand really, really short-term attention, can be quite detrimental. And something like mindfulness is the perfect antidote to that, to help people focus, tune in, and really, I guess, regulate your own awareness rather than let it be pulled by other forces outside of your control, really. So how do we encourage mindfulness in others? Number one is to lead by example. Don't be someone that says, do as I say and not what I do. You want to live it and breathe it if you want to inspire others to action. Essentially, you want the young people around you to see you meditating, see you discussing the benefits, engage in deep conversation about what it means for you and what it is and why you're doing it. And you also want to be demonstrating the benefits in a lived way. So if they see you being less reactive, less impulsive, more focused, having more positive emotion, and that sort of thing, they'll be a lot more inclined to think, hey, maybe that's a good idea. Number two is about encouraging interest and not really forcing it. You want to lead with the carrot and not the stick here. So it's really important to encourage a sense of curiosity around mindfulness in a way that's not really direct or forced. So even things as simple as encouraging your children to be intentional by planning their day or really focusing on what they're doing while they're playing or they're working, just focusing in that attention and reminding them to be intentional about what they're doing and what's happening in their mind and where their thoughts are going. And even something as simple as encouraging self-awareness through engaging in deep conversation about reflections at the end of the day, promoting that sense of self-awareness, and really that sort of deep reflective thought, which is so integral in mindfulness. Number three is about moving into a space where mindfulness goes beyond simple meditation, so encouraging someone to be curious and engage with all of their experience. So everything that's coming in, you can be aware of all of it. So all of your senses, sight, touch, smell, taste, all of that. It's goes a long way in encouraging mindfulness in children if you can get them interested in the various things coming into their world and into their experience. And number four is about introducing variety. So you don't have to just sit and listen to your breath or watch your breath in like you would in a Vipassana meditation. You can do a whole range of things, such as a walking meditation. You can use music. You can do something like transcendental meditation, where you follow like a mantra or something like that. There's a whole range and variety of ways to actually experience mindfulness, and I would encourage you to investigate that with them and really let them choose their own path of what's going to actually work for them, and get them into that place where they can feel like they're still and they've calmed their mind and they're experiencing the world in a way that's really open and not cluttered by unnecessary looping thinking. So that's pretty much everything we had to discuss today. If you want to learn more about anything that we've talked about, there is a full write-up of these answers on their live website. Just go to the Together forum page and click on the Ask a Live section, and all the extra resources will be there as well, like links to some of the resources I spoke about and some of the research that I did to put this together. Some of the things we'll be discussing next time are the keto diet and some of the potential uses of psychedelics when done in a safe and controlled setting. And don't forget to ask your questions if you're curious about anything at all.